Chapter 9 in your book starts on page 269, and this talks a little bit about qualifying the property. Kind of where we went so far is we've talked about the buyer being able to qualify for the financing, the lender looking at the risk aspect of the buyer, their job stability, their amount of debt they're carrying, and how that corresponds with the buyer being able to qualify financially. Well, what we really haven't talked a lot about is the property and its ability to qualify for the loan also, because not only does the lender look at the buyer in regard to risk, how much risk they're basing on the buyer's income and debt and things like that. They're also looking at the property. What kind of condition is this property in? How does the price fit in with comparable properties that have sold in the area? What I've also done is I've uploaded in your Files tab on Canvas in the left-hand side, I've uploaded a sample appraisal report. And we've talked a little bit about appraisals and how the appraiser is basically the eyes and ears of the lender. So the lender is basically looking at the property on paper. And the appraisal report that I have uploaded will give you an idea about what the lender looks for in regard to appraisal. The book goes into several areas of determining value of the property. So when the appraiser gets the order from the lender, the appraiser is going to determine or try to make sure that the price that the buyer is paying for the property is consistent with the other sales in the neighborhood. So basically, the appraiser is making sure the buyer's not paying too much for the property, essentially. There's several methods that an appraiser can use in determining the value. The sales comparison approach is what is mostly used. The replacement cost method, the income method, and the final value. On page 270 and 271, especially the top of page 271, talks about the principles of value, the highest and best use. And what they're talking about there is if you have a property, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, in a 100-house subdivision, the highest and best use for that property is single-family housing, compared to or versus maybe a property that is maybe on a busy thoroughfare, busy street, that's surrounded by a mixture of maybe commercial properties, car lots, things like that, where conversely, the highest and best use of that property might not be a single-family home. Its highest and best use might be for commercial purposes. So, the highest and best use is a important term that appraisers use frequently, and y'all can kind of go through the rest of those 7 there. There's a little right below the box on page 271. There's an example of about what somebody thinks their property's worth versus what the bank would think it's worth. The form that I've put up on Canvas is a Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. It's a Fannie Mae form. Federal National Mortgage Association. That is a form similar to the HUD-1 settlement statements. It's used, that particular form is used throughout the country. It's a very generic form that all appraisers use. The appraiser, kind of some of their roles and some of their duties starts on page 274 and ends up on 275. In the kind of the sidebar on page 275 kind of gives you a kind of a short version of what the appraiser does when they're conducting their appraisal. The comparative market analysis, or CMA, is a term that realtors use frequently. Comparative market analysis, or comparable market analysis, where when a property owner calls the realtor goes out, looks at the property, does some work on the computer to determine the sales in the neighborhood, and basically we're trying to give the seller a range of value or a range of pricing. The seller isn't just depending on a neighbor that said, well, our house sold for this amount. A neighbor is unverifiable. The sales comparison approach uses historical sold data, and the historical sold data must be able to be verified. It must be verifiable either through a computerized multiple listing service, or it can be verified through neighbors, but there's documentation that has to be brought forward to actually prove up the value or prove up the price that a property actually sold for. So y'all can read through 278 and 279. Those are really good areas to look at. Page 280. Just kind of read through the rest of this chapter, and please feel free to email me if you have any questions that need to be clarified. Look over the appraisal report. There's a blank one in your book. The one I sent you is actually an appraisal that was done on one of my listings a few years ago. All the important stuff has been marked out, but confidential things. But anyway, the one that I have sent you is a completed appraisal report. Just kind of read through that. Take your chapter quiz, go over the questions there, and hopefully this will help. Thanks.